Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this past weekend in Germany. Reigning WBO minimum weight champion Sarah Bormann successfully defended her title against Spain's own Isabel Rivero, winning a split decision over 10 rounds. In what is her third consecutive victory since dropping a split decision to Jessica Niri Plata, rebounding off the loss with Tamara DeMarco, becoming a champion against Jennifer Meza, and successfully defending the title against Isabel Rivero. Sporting a professional record of 20 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 7 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 21 professional bouts, Sarah Bormann now has options. Having successfully defended the WBO title, she can rack up a few more voluntary defenses of the belt, or she can aim a bit higher at bigger fish. It just so happens that Yokasta Valle, this division's WBC champion, and Sarah Bormann are the number 1 and number 2 ranked fighters at the weight. A fight between them would be the very best fight to make in the division, and could be for the Ring Magazine title! Yokasta Valle sports a professional record of 33 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 10 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 36 professional bouts. A 3-weight champion, last in action 2 divisions north of minimum at Fly. Opposite the ring, former unified champion Marlene Esparza, who I picked Yokasta to beat. And she did. But I still don't understand the circumstances of that contest. I still don't know what the rhyme and the reason was for Yokasta campaigning that high when she's got a title right there at minimum and there are champions available to fight. Why fight Marlene? What was the point? I hope they don't got it in their heads to do a fight between her and Gabby Fundora. I don't want to see Gabby fighting somebody that much smaller than she is. I would much rather see Yokasta Valle return to the minimum weight division and become its next undisputed champion, currently on a 3-fight winning streak since having dropped a decision to Sinicia Estrada in what was a competitive match. I would much rather see her fight Sarah Bormann. Sarah, who I just mentioned. Sarah, who was in action this past Saturday in defense of the WBO title. Sarah's got options.
Yokasta beats her.
In truth, I think Yokasta Valle beats them all. I think she beats Japan's own Yuko Kuroki, the WBA champion. I think Yokasta beats Sol Kudos, the newly crowned IBF champion. And I think Yokasta beats Sarah Bormann.
Yokasta beats her.
Now, what applies to Yokasta also applies to Sarah. They're not their only option at this weight. If you're Sarah Bormann and you don't feel quite ready to take on the number 1 at the weight, you can fight Yuko Kuroki in a unification match. You can fight Sol Kudos. Sarah can beat them. She'll beat them before she beats Yokasta Valle. She can draw them out to Germany, where she would have home field advantage. Those 2 fighters, those 2 champions, don't have the money behind them that Sarah has behind her. Enough to keep her busy and keep her active, keep her fighting. I don't think you gotta pay through the nose to get Sol Kudos in the ring, or Yuko Kuroki. Yokasta Valle, however,
she's the A-side.
She has more money behind her than Sarah Bormann. So if what you're talking about is a Valle versus Bormann fight, you're talking about a fight that would happen on Yokasta's terms. That could be in America, on a Golden Boy promotion show, or that could be in her native Costa Rica, where she promotes her own shows, where she is quite well known. Comparatively, Yokasta Valle is a much bigger draw in Costa Rica than Sarah is in Germany. The fight. You talk about Yokasta Valle versus Sarah Bormann as a fight, and you're talking about an all-action shootout, because they're both
mid-range to inside combination punchers and action fighters. But I happen to think Yokasta Valle punches harder, she's more battle-tested, across more divisions, more weights. She's not a knockout merchant, so I don't think she knocks out Sarah Bormann, but I do see Yokasta winning a decision. If they make it.
Yokasta wins that fight, out-hustling and out-fighting Sarah Bormann mid-range to inside, where she normally does her best work. Sarah is a textbook pressure fighter.
She's effective with that style, but like most pressure fighters, there's not that much to her. There aren't that many layers to her game.
And I think Yokasta beats her. I hope that is Yokasta's next destination, back to minimum weight for some unification matches, because she stands a strong chance of becoming this division's next undisputed champion. We'll see what happens, and congratulations to Sarah Bormann for successfully defending her WBO title.
$500,000 on this car that's going to depreciate,
right?
And it's not an asset. Or do you want to spend $20,000 on this car that's going to work just as well as this car and cost less to fix it up?
Right.
Then buy you some assets on the side, and then plan for your future, or you can live for now.
What's the worst investment you made? You buy something, I mean, you say you're not big into cars. You never bought no Rolls, no Ferrari. What the hell, you driving a pickup truck in Omaha?
Yeah. Yeah. I do got a pickup truck. A 2025 GMC Denali. HD.
Okay. Ultimate.
Yeah. 2,500.
You on a farm? You got a farm?
I drag your little car. Hey, you want to talk about my truck? I hook your little ride up.
Well, you know,
that diesel, you gonna be like, hey. I'm
gonna go get me a 650 tomorrow.
That's cool.
And pull the rear end off your truck.
You ain't gonna pull the rear end. We gonna be fighting. If you can have this car and this car, they both gonna get to the destination at the same time.
Right. What have you learned about money?
It's paper. It comes and goes. It changes people.
I sure like it better coming and going.
Yeah. But it's the crazy thing is, what money do for you but make you comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
It don't make you happy.
No.
It don't fix things. It can fix certain things.
What about freedom? It does allow you a certain level of freedom.
Nah, in certain aspects. Because you can have money, you can have a lot of money but still can't get in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a lot of money but still can't sit at certain people's table.
Right.
So money is just a tool that you use to, be somewhat comfortable.
I really enjoyed Shannon Sharpe's sit-down interview with Terrence Crawford. Those insights into Terrence Crawford's mind, as opposed to what you see from some other fighters with their delusions of grandeur and desire to be rock stars and live like them.
Spend money like them, even after they stop making money.
And what I've always appreciated about Terrence Crawford is that he is a lot more centered and a lot more grounded than so many other fighters and so many other athletes in a very general sense.
He doesn't make a bunch of money from the Spence fight and run out and buy a Bugatti.
He doesn't make a bunch of money with Turkey LL Chic and blow it all on expensive toys the way a child would. He makes a bunch of money, then uses that money to make more money.
But you heard what he said. Why spend $500,000 on a car when you can spend $25,000 and get to the same destinations and still have money to invest in other areas of life? Assets. Planning for the future.
I definitely understood what Shannon meant when he said that money does get you freedom, doesn't it? The freedom to plan out your day however you want to, because you're not under anybody's thumb. You don't have to answer to anybody the more money you have.
You wake up when you want to, leave the house when you want to, do what you want to, when you want to. That's what money can bring you.
Though at the same time, the more money you have, the more money people are going to ask you for. The more money, more people are going to try to take.
I mean, look at the situation that Shannon is going through with that OnlyFans model. Do you think that she'd be going to those lengths and he'd be going through all that if he had your run-of-the-mill 9-to-5 in the rat race like the rest of us?
If he didn't have a bunch of money, would he find himself in that situation that the money itself sometimes can be a prison?
Meet a broad, get married, Then you end up divorced and she tries to take you for everything you got.
Expensive tastes and the pursuit of money, more of it, can be a prison unto itself depending on how you look at it. And the bottom line is, money isn't the end-all and be-all, at least not to Terrence Crawford. As stated, it's a tool.
You could tell he means business because he was offered a fortune to fight Conor McGregor, something to the tune of $200 million, I think it was, for one boxing match and one fight in the octagon, that if it were all about money for Terrence, he would have took that offer.
If it were just about the money, he would have whored himself out for that money, like so many others would.
But he's not hurting for money, and to him, money isn't everything. It's just a tool.
Suppose that's another part of the reason that some people don't identify with a Terrence Crawford the way they do with a Gervonta Davis or an Errol Spence Jr., these more dysfunctional athletes.
Individuals more prone to less sustainable spending habits.
Bad habits overall that they see in those fighters, they see in themselves. As they say, birds of a feather flock together, whereas Terrence seems mundane to them.
Boring.
Because he's not passed out on somebody's sidewalk in an alcoholic stupor, because he's not flipping Ferraris.
Because he's not a wannabe rapper like an Adrian Bronor.
Now, Terrence has his stuff that he likes to do, I'm sure that he does, but outwardly, to the boxing community at large, he is a family man.
Seems to be his focus, and focusing on the future, planning for it, so that his kids can actually have one.
I admire that about him, but at the same time, I understand why that makes him seem mundane to the boxing community at large that want to see more charismatic and maybe even toxic characters.
With less sustainable spending habits ultimately crashing and burning like so many boxers and so many athletes before them, it's the same story, old as time.
Terrence is in many ways the hustler that so many other guys pretend to be. The self-made man and the boss.
He's just not loud about it.
What is the common theme among doers like Terrence Crawford? They're so busy doing what they set out to do, they ain't got time to talk.
To convince you they're doing what they're doing because they're actually doing it.
No frivolous spending. What is a lifestyle obsession based on the principle that more is better?
Wanting what you don't have, which creates a perpetual state of wanting that never wanes, never dissipates. It's better to want what you have
Then obsess about what you don't. Money in and of itself, it's a tool, and it's nice to have a lot of it.
I'm not trying to give money a bad name.
But money in and of itself isn't everything, and neither are material possessions. At the end of the day, we're all leaving the same way.
You can't take any of it with you.
I get what he meant. I understood what he said.
And finally, in super middleweight news, ahead of the upcoming Caleb Plant versus Resendiz fight, friend of the channel, Inevitable D Block, asked, why is Caleb Plant not a pay-per-view star? He's a great fighter, he's American. What's the problem?
Well, I think the problem is the question. Because the question in and of itself implies that he should be a pay-per-view star, that he's gone through the necessary process, the necessary steps, that he should be having more success in that area. It's important to note that Caleb Plant has already boxed on pay-per-views, main events, more than once, but as the opponent.
Not the A side.
He was the B-side to Canelo Alvarez like he was the B-side to David Benavidez. If he comes through his next fight, then maybe.
He's the A side to Jermall Charlo?
Well, that's why I said maybe. I think the problem is the question in and of itself implies that he has all the ingredients to be a pay-per-view star, and yet he isn't.
There's your problem. Your problem is the question. The exact ingredients for what makes a box office attraction are not the same across the board. What makes Canelo Alvarez a pay-per-view star, for example, is not the same thing that made Floyd Mayweather a pay-per-view star. They're different guys, different temperaments, different fighting styles, different fan bases.
It's not an exact science.
Because the same things that made Floyd Mayweather a box office attraction are not the same things that made Oscar De La Hoya a box office attraction, are not the same things that made Mike Tyson a box office attraction. That when you really get into it, making a box office fighter a pay-per-view star is not an exact science, nor has it ever been.
What exactly makes a large audience gravitate towards a fighter varies from fighter to fighter. It's not the same across the board. So when you ask that question about Caleb,
why is he not a pay-per-view star?
Well, there's a misconception that if every fighter plays their cards right and does everything right, they'll all end up on pay-per-view, where pay-per-view was never intended for every fighter, every fight, across every division. It was really for the biggest of the big fights.
That's not Caleb.
The fundamental flaw in that perspective is you got Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney, two fighters that are comparatively more accomplished than Ryan Garcia. They've been champions at multiple weights and beaten champions to see themselves become champions, but Ryan's the one in the main event. Ryan's the one headlining, more popular than both.
It's not an exact science.
Why specifically is Ryan more popular than they are? You can point to his social media following, but then you can ask, why don't they have the same social media following that he has? This is a guy who's gone on a racist tirade, said some awful things.
He's tested positive for a banned substance, exhibited unstable, unhinged behavior publicly,
And for whatever reason, that endears him to some people. It makes him more popular than Teofimo, even though he's unstable. It makes him more popular than Devin, more popular than a lot of fighters, some of which are more accomplished than he is, accenting that this is not an exact science.
nor has it ever been.
The approach is conventional, but the end results are not. The hope is that by the time a fighter climbs up the ranks and fights for a belt or some belts, becomes an undisputed champion, by that time he will have become a draw. But it's not the same for everybody. It's not the same across the board.
Jermel Charlo did that, but he never went on to become as popular as Ryan is, who didn't do any of that.
So is that to say that fighters should forego that entire process? Why fight for a belt or some belts when you got guys like Ryan that don't even fight for him, and look at all the money he's making? Should they skip that?
No.
No, they shouldn't, because you're not Ryan, and becoming a box office attraction is not an exact science. What you need to do is find a way to get the fans on your side. Now, you can do that by fighting in fights they want to see you in, putting out good performances, win or lose. It worked for Derek Chisora.
He's got losses in the double digits, but he makes more money than most boxers.
The key is tapping into the audience and finding a way to endear yourself to them. If Caleb Plant still hasn't, that could be for a variety of reasons.
Maybe the audience just doesn't find him exciting, don't find him charismatic, or his fights. He's a good fighter.
But Guillermo Regandiao was a good fighter, an Olympic double gold medalist, unified at super bantamweight, who was never a draw. This is not an exact science.
It never was.
The misalignment, I think, is thinking that if all these guys tick off on particular boxes, they'll all end up being pay-per-view stars. That is a flawed perspective, because to begin with, pay-per-view was never intended for everybody. It was never intended for every fighter or every fight across every division. It was only supposed to be for the biggest of the big fights.
So what you're asking, why isn't Caleb a pay-per-view star yet? I'm thinking to myself, of course he isn't. It's hard to become a pay-per-view star.
Most fighters are not going to become big box office attractions. So when you look at it from a perspective where this is not easy to do, it's not an exact science, the same things that work for one guy may not work for the other.
If you look at the whole thing as not being a given, it's not a given you'll become a pay-per-view star.
If you look at it as not being likely, then you don't have to ask why Caleb isn't a pay-per-view star, as most boxers are not pay-per-view stars. They're not, and they're not gonna be.